Uh, there's a reason why the Star Wars movies have long captured people's imaginations and been so engaging. They resonate with so many of the core stories that we know. And in an interesting way, it is as though we are at the end of the movie The Empire Strikes Back right now in Genesis. Han Solo, the quick-talking cowboy hero, has been captured and frozen in a kind of prison. Luke Skywalker, who thought he was ready to take on Darth Vader, is humiliated, and he's left both physically and spiritually broken. The Millennium Falcon is damaged and barely escapes. The rebellion has lost its base, and it's been betrayed. And Darth Vader seems stronger than ever. This is where we finished our story last week in Genesis. After the epic celebration, right, of all that is good and very good in Genesis chapters 1 and 2, the things that God has made, chapters 3 through 11, they take us into a deep darkness. God's very good world has been destroyed by the people whose one job was to take care of it. And even after God remakes it all, humans pretty quickly set their eyes on destroying it again. And the story tells us why. It says there is a deep corruption within the human heart. Genesis 6:5 says it this way: Yahweh saw that the wickedness of humanity was great on the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of the heart was only evil continually. And then again, after cleansing creation from these wicked, evil humans, God looks at the only remaining people, Noah and his family, and says in chapter 8, verse 21, the ideas of the human heart are evil from youth. Right? And this isn't just the bad people out there. Genesis 3 through 11 suggests that every human has a heart made good that has been twisted. And so this is why we can all sometimes be selfish, right? Why we can sometimes be jealous of others. Sometimes then purposely hurting other people. Maybe not physically, but maybe emotionally or with our words. This is why sometimes we do the right things, but we do it for the wrong reasons. We do it for ourselves. And why sometimes we just pass right by somebody in need. Kids in the room, whatever ages you are, I don't know if you've considered this, but if you ever wonder why sometimes you don't listen to your parents, or why sometimes you find yourself being mean to them, even when they do everything for you. I have heard kids ask the question, why do I do these things to my parents? They love me, I know that. Genesis 3 through 11 suggests that there is something broken in our hearts. That our hearts lead us to do things that hurt people who love us. People who we feel strong feelings for. Right? It's like how parts of our bodies might get a physical disease. Our body parts are supposed to work a certain way, but then for whatever reason, right, they stop working the way that they are supposed to. And sometimes we can fix our body parts with medicine or with surgery. And sometimes we can actually just like remove parts of the body and even replace them. And sometimes we can simply manage the pain or the problem for the rest of our lives. And sometimes God just miraculously, completely fixes that part for us. Just as our heart can become physically sick, our hearts can also become spiritually and relationally sick. And that is the default condition of the human heart. I'll just pause there for a second, because I understand that that's a big claim, and actually also a counterclaim to a lot of the messages and other truth claims of our culture and in our world. And I'm curious, right, how it lands for you, and I want you to consider that. These stories, they are orienting us to the truth that we are born with hearts that are sick, that this is our default condition. And I wonder, do you believe this is true? Sometimes we believe things, we agree with things, but maybe don't live as though they're true. And so let me give you an example. Just notice how you listen to the news. Specifically, how do you react when you find out that people in the world have done horribly evil things? Like, is this the most shocking revelation in the world? Does it shake your whole world when these things happen? Or do you have a sense that, yeah, this is what we're all capable of? Or do you hear it and you go, yeah, of course those terrible people are like that? Our reaction will reveal something of what we believe about our hearts. And the Bible is making a truth claim, and we don't have to accept it or believe it. But it is making the claim that our hearts are born sick, that we are born not wanting what God wants, born wanting what God didn't make us for, and that we are born, to use Augustine's language, bent in on ourselves rather than bent out and toward God and others. And the question is, right, does this claim, does it make better sense of the world that we live in than the other claims that are out there? Does this claim that our hearts are evil from youth, does it help us to walk with God? There's one more truth embedded in these stories, and that is that the condition of our hearts makes God sad. That in Genesis 1 through 11, we don't find an angry God, we find a sad God. A God who is really sad. Genesis tells us that it grieves God's heart, that his prized possession has become this. And so in a very real way, relevant way, this is the end of the movie, The Empire Strikes Back, right? You get to the end of Genesis 11 and hope is lost. Evil seems to constantly win. Grief reigns. And there are points where even God just seems to be done with us. And so what good could possibly come in the future? This is the question that lingers at the end of chapter 11. And this is where we pick up the story. In a world that is marked by sin and by human suffering, God speaks, right? Just like at the beginning, when the earth was wild and waste, as one translator captures it, when it was chaotic and disordered, a mess, when it was without form and void, God spoke, right? And he began to bring order out of the chaos. In Genesis chapter 12, God speaks again. And it's not, let there be light, but this time it's something like, let there be a man, a person. And just as God separated the light from the dark, God tells the man to go from your country, go from your kindred, go from your father's house or household. And he separates the man from the rest of, not only humanity, but the rest of his own family. And if we are reading this story, looking for God's response, for God's salvation, and we think that God is like about to make things right in an instant, to reorder the world in a single day, we are immediately mistaken. Because this man, Abram, is 75 years old, and he's got a long journey with God ahead of him. And God appears to be in no rush to take care of things. But not only is God not in a rush, which is upsetting to me because I just want him to hurry things along, be so much more convenient. But I want to suggest to you that God makes a choice that it just seems a little weird. It's not the choice I would make. I don't know why God didn't get my opinion first. But look at who he chooses. Abram is nobody. God will later emphasize this when he's speaking to Abram's descendants and family hundreds of years later. But Abram was an insignificant nobody. There were probably way better candidates. In fact, we get one named for us. In Genesis 10, we learn about the first mighty man on earth. I love how he's described, a mighty hunter before Yahweh. This is a tough guy. The guy is named, and he's lifted up right in the middle of this long list of names. And there's apparently a saying about this guy that is so well known culturally that it winds up in the Bible. The phrase goes, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before Yahweh. Scholars are really confused about what this really means. But it does tell us that Nimrod was well known, and these sayings spread everywhere. Nimrod. And we're told that he builds a kingdom. And this kingdom is called Babel. And apparently, this kingdom is so attractive. Right? Nimrod is such an inspiring leader that even though God told people to go out and to fill the earth, to spread over the earth, they're like, no, we want to be where Nimrod is. And they all gather together in Babel. And we don't know for sure that it was Nimrod, but Hebrew Bible scholars have long speculated based on the various details that were given in the text that Nimrod is basically the leader behind the Tower of Babel. If mighty Nimrod, this powerful fighter, could inspire the nations to come together, if Nimrod, this human, could draw all people together around a single purpose, imagine what God could do with a good Nimrod. One who's just as popular, just as powerful, just as influential, but one who just loves God and wants to make God's name known rather than his own. Nimrod's reputation is hanging in the air when we hear God speak to Abram. Because if one man could unite all of humanity around a project that would compete with God, right, the Tower of Babel, then God could definitely find one man capable of doing the same, but for him. But rather than pick a somebody that people are attracted to who begins to rally everybody, God picks a nobody from an insignificant family. And God sends him away from all of his resources, sends him away from his people, from his connections. And God makes insane, massive promises through this nobody. Promises that seem impossible when we hear them. Abram doesn't have a single child, and yet God promises to make Abram a people, right? People. It's plural. It's pretty hard to be a plural people when you are just a person, and you can't seem to make another one of those. God promises to make Abram's name great. I mean, Abram, the nobody. God will bless people through Abram, and God will curse people who dishonor Abram. And here's like the doozy in the list. In you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. In you, Abram. What? How? Like, really? Through this guy? It's crazy. Because there are already some hints that this choice is going to backfire. First, we discover that this actually isn't the first time that God has tried to get Abram to the land of Canaan. Abram's father, a man named Terah, has so far taken Abram and the family, Genesis 11:31 tells us, from Ur of the Chaldeans, Babylonians, Babel, to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Right? So the story is they went to Canaan, but like got partway there and were like, we're good here. And so Abram already has in his DNA a habit of like going halfway. In the book of Acts, a man named Stephen retells Abram's story, and he tells it this way. He says, the God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, another name for Babylon, Babel, Ur. When he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, and said to him, go out from your land and from your kindred and go to the land that I will show you. Then he went out from the land of the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, and lived in Haran. And after his father died, God removed him from there and into this land. So notice, Abram was supposed to leave not only Ur, Mesopotamia, Babel, but also leave his family. But though Abram leaves, what do we notice? He takes his family with him. He's told to leave his father's household, but he literally brings his father and his father's household. And when they arrive in Haran, we're told they settle in, right? They make a home for themselves. They get comfortable. As I was reflecting on this week, I was struck by how often, right, like we hear God prompting us, speaking, leading. We sense God guiding or directing. And how often, like, we get started. Like, we get moving. Like, we respond. Like, yeah, I want to go where God is leading. We start to move. But it doesn't take us that long before we're settling into some new norm. And it's not quite the place that God had for us. And I had never really thought about this in light of this passage, but last year, almost a year ago, we had our 2025 vision night, like who are we as Discovery and what are we up to and what's going on this next year? And I described for us our journey of our neighborhood groups this way. That over many years, our leaders have sensed God leading us to show up in the neighborhoods that we live in, to show up with other believers as the body of Christ in the neighborhoods where we're at. That we have sensed God calling us to be the living physical presence of Jesus in our neighborhoods with other Christians. That we've been hearing this, sensing this, following this for years. And really more than 4 years ago, we started to actively reorganize ourselves, our life together, so that we could connect with each other in the neighborhoods where we live, right in our neighborhoods. But it is amazing because over a couple years, we had sort of given up on getting there. We had settled into different groups in a different structure. And last year was an effort to say, okay, no, God has not stopped leading us in this way, and we are going to pick up and we're going to keep moving from Haran, the place where we had settled. It's interesting. Abram is supposed to leave his family back in Ur originally. But now that he's in Haran, this middle place, God once again says that he is to go. And he is to go from your country and your kindred and your father's household. Right? The implication again is that they've begun to call Haran their home. That this place that wasn't their home has now become their country. How quickly we settle. But also, Abram's father's family seems to play a corrupting or distracting influence on Abram. And so you get this impression that if he is going to follow Yahweh with his life, he needs to leave them and their ways and their values and their gods behind. Because his family will ask Abram to settle again. They will ask Abram to compromise. We pick up the story, chapter 12, verse 4, and we hear beautiful words of obedience, of trust. So Abram went as Yahweh told him. Oh, I don't know about you, but there are so many moments in the Bible where people just don't do what God says, that these moments you go, yes, it's happening, it's possible. It's a great sign. And then the next breath is, and Lot went with him. Abram's brother's son. Family. Once again, he's taken the family with him. And we'll find out what Lot's up to soon enough. But can we just acknowledge that Abram seems like a weird choice? And yet this is exactly who God chooses. God chooses to be in relationship with an imperfect nobody. God chooses to use somebody who, in the act of obedience, is already failing him. And it's only going to get worse from here. And rather than hide from Abram and hide from Abram's sin, God just keeps showing up. He doesn't quit on Abram. God chooses to use one man, not a powerful ruler who can force the world into submission, not an eloquent man who can inspire the world to follow. God just chooses one man who will learn what it means to walk humbly with God. And this man will be the beginning for what God wants to do with every person from every nation in the world. This man will become the beginning of God setting creation right. This story of God calling this one man, it shapes our imagination for how God might save the world, because we are so tempted to dream of mighty fighters who God might send to save us. Great speakers who can inspire us and motivate us to action. But instead, God just sends a guy and tells him to move, set up a home, and to trust him and follow him. When we know this story, when it's in us, we start to see it being lived out everywhere, which is why when I was on Friday this week, I got to have coffee with a friend of mine named Newman. I heard this story was screaming in my ears as Newman was updating me on his life. Newman was in my hall, or my suite, which is like a small collection of rooms, when I went to Point Loma 24 years ago. Newman used to come into our room, specifically when I was trying to go to sleep at like midnight, and he would make it impossible for me. He would make noise, and he would bang on stuff, and he would say, "Curtis, college isn't for sleeping." I know, but I'm so tired and my classes are early. When we'd be studying, me, my roommates, trying to read, he'd come into our room, he'd be like, "You're studying again?" He'd yell at us and tell us, "You're not supposed to read in college." Just so everybody knows, this is not good advice. This is the advice he gave us. And then he'd make us go surfing. Newman was a menace our freshman year of college, a hilarious menace. And we became great friends. A few years ago, Newman, his wife, and his 5 kids were living in Thailand as missionaries. Some things have changed for him, clearly, over the years. But they have this beautiful ministry in Thailand. They loved their lives, and they felt like they were serving God right where they were supposed to be. And then one night, Newman had the only vision he's ever had in his entire life. And he said he saw a man in this vision from the country of Slovenia, a country he didn't know existed. He was like, "Slovakia? No, Slovenia is a country." He didn't know it until he woke up from this vision, his dream at night, and he looked it up, and he's like, "Oh, it is a place." But in this vision, this man was asking him to come, needed Newman to come. And Newman told his wife, and she goes, "It sounds like this is from the Lord." She was pretty quickly convinced. And after a short time of discernment where they asked their kids if they thought they should go, and the kids were like, "No." And they're like, oops. Well, let's vote. And the kids voted against it. They were like, "Oh, shoot. Okay, parental executive decision, we're going." And their oldest daughter said, "You're ruining my life." They thought, maybe she is embracing at this point where they're at. But here's what happened. They decided, we're following God. And they packed up their stuff and they moved to Slovenia on a tourist visa. And so they were staying in hostels, no place to go. They don't know what they're supposed to do there. They prayed that God would show them where to live, and God did. And they prayed that God would help them establish residency. And after a season of actually their tourist visa ending and them having no other visas, they existed there as illegal immigrants for a season. And they gained their legal status at some point. And along the way, they're praying that God would show them why they are there. And here they are now, a couple years later. Today, they have a small house church in the country of Slovenia. This house church is made up of Thai people. Yes, right? Like, that's great. That's fantastic. God has a sense of humor. Like people from Thailand who live in Slovenia and who apparently are super open to hearing the good news about Jesus. Apparently there's this hunger among these Thai immigrants, and God has used Newman to teach them and to reach them. And Newman, who terrorized me my freshman year of college, refusing to let me sleep, who actively thwarted my efforts to study, this guy is being sent by God to be a blessing to the nations. He's been sent to Slovenia. And he's gone, trusting God to lead, before even trying to figure out all the details. I mean, it's the story of Abraham, isn't it? It says, go. God doesn't give him any details. He's like, I'll show you when you get there. And then he gets there and he's like, okay, this is what I want to do through you. God continues to call. And I think for most of us, I guarantee for most of it is so much less dramatic than this. For most of us, it is a call to love God right where we are. I mean, the followers of Jesus in the New Testament are called the called ones. And many and most will never go anywhere. But right where we are called to love God and to love our actual neighbors. And while our hearts might be naturally set against obedience, we realize that God has done something for us through his Son to make our hearts soft and to make our hearts responsive to him. That God has done something through Jesus to draw us to himself, to change us and to make us new. And we have this sense that if we are ever going to say yes to God and to God's call, it will only be because we have experienced his grace through Jesus.